Hey everyone, whoa, how's it going? Today we're gonna be building a search bar micro interaction all in Webflow, and we're not gonna be doing any crazy custom code or anything like that, so it should be super simple, beginner friendly, but will elevate your UI components to the next level. So let's check out how to make this thing and let's get started. All right, well, that was an eventful intro, huh? So here's the search bar micro interaction that we'll be making today. When the user hovers over it, it goes from a circle to this pill shape. And if you notice, there's also a fun little animation that happens in the background there. This is going to be a fully functioning search bar, like you can actually type in here. All right, so before we jump into Webflow, there is a couple of things. So as you notice, there's this animation that happens in the background that I got from lottiefiles.com. Check the description below and I will include the exact link to that file. The only thing with what I chose, of course, making my life a lot more difficult, is that it wasn't quite, formatted to exactly what I needed to be. So I had to actually go into After Effects, edit the file, re-export it, and then actually be able to use it. If you don't want to mess around in After Effects and do all of that, you can certainly just type in confetti or honestly whatever animation you want and just grab any one of these and that should work just fine and you can still follow along, no problem. First thing we are going to do is we want to position our element just in the center of the screen. And I'm really just doing this so that it's easier to manipulate for the purpose of this tutorial. All right, so let's add a div. I guess, oh my gosh, another disclaimer is that I do use keyboard shortcuts to navigate Webflow and access different things. So you'll kind of just see, this search bar pop up. That's just Command E. And really the only two shortcut keys I use is Command E and Command Enter, which highlights my style selector. That honestly just saves me a ton of time. Like, even though it's a microsecond, over the course of a 3-month-long project, if you add it up, I mean, it's crazy. So I highly recommend you learn at least these two, keyboard shortcuts. I also use Z to open and close my navigator. But yeah, that should cover everything. My God. Okay, let's go. All right, so we got main wrapper. Let's center our element really quick. So let me add a div block here. We can name this one full page. Let's name it full page wrapper. Then let us also just create another div to literally center everything. So this will be full page layout. All right, so that just centers that guy. And basically just using Flexbox here, make it vertical, center everything, that's about it. And then let's just make the height 100 VH. And then that should span the entirety of the page. So now if I drop in another div in here, yep, there it is. It's right in the center. And now we're kind of ready to get started basically. So the first thing we'll do is we'll name this containing div. Let's name it search container. Our search elements will kind of just fit into this particular container. The next thing is, of course, we'll want our search element. And actually, let me show you where this is. So under add, just scroll down all the way to the, where is that? Advanced. So it's under advanced, it's not under forms or anything like that. So you'll wanna just drag that in here. And then it'll dump kind of all of the default styles for this search container or this search element. All right, so just a kind of disclaimer here. I'm not really prioritizing accessibility. The purpose of this tutorial is just to get you familiar with the workflow for micro interactions. So the first thing I'm doing here is removing the label. So definitely make sure, please make sure everything you create is 1000% accessible. This is still kind of accessible, but already not having a label is not a good look. But hopefully this will at least teach you animation and all that good stuff, right? Okay, so we have our search element here. Let's go ahead and start naming these, but not do the classes, or I'm sorry, the styles just yet, just because we'll just plug in all of our elements, do the styles, and then finally the interactions. That's our workflow. All right, so let's call this search element. All right, and then we have two things here. So by default, this search button is all the way at the bottom here. I just kind of moved it up just because of our design. The search is to the left here, that icon. So that's what this button will be. That's what this button is going to be. So our search button, let's just call that search button. Whoops, search button. All right, and then the input, search input. Perfect. So now everything is nicely named. Let's click into search container and drop in our Lottie file, which is the animation, which is the thing responsible for this animation. So I can just look up Lottie Animation, and there it is. So again, in the add panel, it's all the way at the media group here. It's because it is a type of media. So you have the Lottie Animation. That's essentially what I just plopped into here. So I've already downloaded and I have the file already. So with Lottie, if you're not super familiar with how to work with it, let me know in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to create an actual dedicated tutorial on working with Lotties, because it's a really powerful tool. All right, so I've loaded my Lottie. I'll just keep the render at SVG and not really touch anything else for now. But I will add a class name of search Lottie, just so we have that covered. Cool. All right, so let's just quickly review what happened here. First, I've just created some layout divs to center the component so that it's nice and centered in the screen. And then the actual meat of it is the search container. So this search container holds everything, and it will actually be the thing that holds the styles for making kind of it black, this black background, and it's even going to be the thing that turns it from a circle to this pill shape. So all of that is going to be contained within the container. And then we have our actual search element. The thing with these elements is, because it's a native Webflow component, it's going to come with a bunch of default styles. So that's the first thing we're going to tackle, is just kind of zero out all of the styles, so we're not kind of fighting with these pixel units and things like that, right? So we want full control. The last thing we did was to have a sibling called search Lottie to the search element, and both of them are kind of within this search container. All right, so that is all that happened there. All right, so let us start with our search container. Now, the way that I'm going to be styling this is just top to bottom, again, just for the ease of use of, or just the ease of this tutorial. Typically, when you're building these things out, you're probably going to be hopping around, but I think it'll be a little bit easier to follow along this way. All right, so we got our search container here, and the very first thing we're going to be doing with this search container is we are actually going to be specifying a static-ish width, right? And I say static-ish because I'm not using pixel value. I'm still using relative M units here, which means, it can change depending on the default browser font size. That's how rem units work. And then, so I'm gonna set one for width, and then I'm also going to set one for height. So here it is at height. Then, now that I have kind of my width and height set up, the next thing I'm going to do is just hide overflow. So this will make sure that everything is contained within this pill or this container, so that nothing is kind of overflowing or anything crazy like that. I am going to be using some absolute positioning on some of the elements, so I'm gonna go ahead and just switch this over to relative so that any kind of children that it has will be relative to this container, which is what we want. All right, so this is, let's keep moving down here. So we've set it to relative. The only other thing that we'll want to do, of course, is, like I mentioned, this is going to hold the color. So that's going to be black, and then our border radius. So to create circles, you just set a really high border radius, and that rounds all of your borders out to the point where it actually becomes a pill. Or if you want a circle, then of course you just set your width and height to be the same value, which is a square. And then now you can see there's like a bit of a circle outline there, right? So that's a circle. So essentially you can kind of see that that's how we're going to be animating and controlling things. You know, that's a simple hover interaction here where we just change the width property to get this look. And let's continue styling this. So we did our search container. That's everything we need there. For now, I'm going to be leaving this as a pill, which is, you know, my width is wider than the height. All right, so let's click search element. So as I mentioned, there's going to be some default values that Webflow is going to be imposing on it. So we want to get rid of that. The other thing is I do want to just make sure that the width is 100%. It should be fine as auto, but you know, you just kind of never know with these Webflow elements. So better safe than sorry. All right, I'm also gonna switch this over to relative because I'm going to want to manipulate the top value of this. So for now, I'm gonna do 0.1 rem. Just to give me a starting point so I can kind of like move this up and down. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. All right. So what else do we need to do with this search element? The other thing is I do want to force the cursor to go to pointer just so that we cover our bases and the user knows that this is an actionable element. Yeah, so that's basically that. All right, so everything should be kind of good. We can also, if we want to, we can change this color to white, just so everything kind of hopefully will inherit that. So now, you know, they're all kind of color white, so that's good. The next one is the search button. You can see this is an official button element for Webflow. So we got search button here. For sure, it's gonna have a bunch of random, well, not a lot, but it has a background that it comes with, and we definitely do not want that. All right, but before we start manipulating the background, like I mentioned, we are going to be positioning things absolutely. So this is one of those items. So I'm gonna go ahead and click block as my display and position this absolutely, and just kind of align this over here. So we're just gonna kind of put a rem value in here again so I can kind of grab it, and we'll set a Z index of 2 for this button, and I'll walk you through why I'm doing all of this basically. All right, so I had to position this one absolute because if I didn't, you'll see that the input is actually below it, right? So they're kind of, you know, wrapping or collapsing. So they're stacking on top of each other. And I want this button to be right on top of this search input, or at least, you know, in the same kind of Z plane. So to do that, absolute positioning removes it from the DOM, or like the natural flow of things on your, you know, on the web page, and makes it so that it's only now referencing or relative to the parent element, or any parent element that has a relative on it. So here, if I switch this back over to absolute, which is what we want, now it's relative to our search element. And as you remember, I converted that to relative there. If this wasn't, you know, set to relative, it would then default to search container, because this one we also set to relative, and then up it goes all the way until body if there's no one that's that has a position relative. All right, so this search button in our design, we have an icon, so we're gonna go ahead and remove this text again to the accessibility people. there's a much better way to go about this, but we're just strictly focusing on interaction design today. I will for sure have other videos that's more centered around, good usage, proper accessibility, all that good stuff. All right, so choose image. I've loaded up already my little magnifying glass icon here. There's a couple of things that we're gonna need to do with this one. First, I can't set the width to auto because it's gonna be too big. You can see the default value of this SVG is 34 by 34. I'm gonna convert this to a rem unit. So that's just going to reduce the size of it. I'm also going to set the position to center. So this is a background of this rectangle area that you see here. So I just want to make sure this icon isn't on the top left or anything like that. We also don't want to tile it because we just want one instance of it. And we're probably going to have to move things around on the left property here. So let's kind of just do that for now. All right, so now we have our search button all set up there. Let's see, what else do we need to do to this guy? I think that's it, yeah. So you'll also notice that I increased the Z index to 2. And this is because this is a trigger or a button. So a user needs to be able to click this. And because we're in absolute positioning, we're now stacking elements on top of each other. So setting it to 2 just guarantees that the user will be able to access this button. Instead of like accidentally clicking the search input as an example. But we're going to take it one step further and actually not make it directly on top of each other, the button and the input. So we're going to be shrinking the input and scooting it over. Before we do that, you can kind of see this rectangle is butting up against there. We'll correct that in just a second. Let's move on into our search input so this thing is a little bit nicer to look at, because right now everything is just like white. All right, so in our search input, again, you'll notice there's a bottom margin here. We don't want that. We do want to add some top and bottom padding here to start. Depending on your font and line height and things like that, you might have to kind of adjust this. We have some default padding here. We also do not want any of that. Well, actually, we might want like a little bit of it. So let's do like, another 0.25 rems. There we go. So we at least have a little bit of a padding, around our text box. Here I am going to be using some percentages so that it's kind of relative to the container. Let's do like 75%. And then as I mentioned, I'm gonna be moving this over to the right. And so to do that, I am going to be setting this to relative and moving it over to the right by like 2 rems, maybe more actually. Let's go to 80. No, let's keep it at 75. Probably gonna wanna move this more. There we go. So that is our search input. And now we can kind of see this search element here is all out of whack. So we're gonna want to just move this button over by a certain amount. So let's say 0.4 rems. There we go. So now it's kind of semi-centered, or at least positioned nicely there. So as far as our search button, if you go back to the final look, there's no background to this text field. It's just a placeholder text there. And so we are going to be removing this in this like default background that Webflow gives it. And by doing that, it reveals kind of our placeholder text. And but you can see if I click out of it, there's still a border. So a lot of these things, they always kind of have borders. So I'm gonna go ahead and click this and just double click here and then set the width to 0, just to really be sure. Oh, whoops, I am not in the right element. I was in full page layout. All right, search input, just double click or click this X here and just set it to 0 if you want the width, and that should get rid of that. Now you'll notice this search is totally not even aligned to here. Whoa. And so like even if you do 100%, or doing it 100% makes it even less aligned, or reduces it. So auto is kind of the nicest way to go here. And then what I would recommend is to just basically, you know, move things. So in the search element, no, sorry, in the search input, we can kind of just scoot this down a touch. So I just went down 0.1 rem, like literally super, super tiny. And you can mess around here. Again, it really depends on your font and typography. So mess around with it, see what works best for you. All right, we're actually almost done already. So we have everything set here. Let's just quickly reduce the font size because we don't want it so big. So now it's 0.8 rems. If you go to the settings, this is where you can change your placeholder text. We'll kind of leave that for now. You can also click to go to the search results page here. We're not going to be styling that for today, so we don't need to worry about that. All right, so now we have this look, which is great. Let's just make sure that everything is actually positioned correctly. And what I mean by that is, as you remember, the initial state of this thing is going to be in this circle. So let's make it into a circle by matching the height and width of this element. And now that we have it matched, you can kind of see that the magnifying glass is not quite centered. So we can do a few things here. I can also see that the bounding box, or like the actual div of this button, is also not centered. So I'm going to want to center at the very least, that box. For here, you can for sure calculate things. It's just kind of sometimes faster to just visually align it instead of like being super calculaty with it, I guess. All right, the other thing that you can do to really refine this thing is maybe reduce the size a little bit and, you know, position it how you want it. So yeah. So maybe somewhere there is looking decent. When you get this granular, it starts to get a little crazy, but yeah, start doing some kind of increment changes there to center your icon. So now everything is aligned, it's looking good. Let's move it back into the, you know, pill shape. So I think I just set this to like 12 rems. It's still looking good. The search input is still there. The last thing we'll have to kind of position is our Lottie. So you can see that this whole thing is where the animation is taking place, and because our container is set to overflow hidden, this is getting cut off. And it's not like positioned absolutely or anything. So all we need to really do is just set this to relative if you want, and just kind of move it up. And so if you accidentally drag it like this, you can just do divided by 16 rem and it'll kind of convert it to rem units. Let's do like 4 rems just so we can kind of see it. You can hit the gear icon and preview animation just to see where like the action lands. And I think that's good. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it at that. And now we are all set. The very last thing that we need to do is just to set up our interactions. All right, so here we are. It's a mouse hover on the search container. Let's add our first one. So let's just name this nicely, search hover in. I like to capitalize the type of interaction state. So whether it's in, out, first click, second click, that kind of thing. So that's just my naming convention. All right, so the first thing we want to do is the search container. We want the size of our search container as its initial state to be the same as the height, right? So we have this value for the height. Let's go back in here. So I want my width to be this value. So there we go. And then I want it to resize and go to 12 rem is what we were using, back to its pill form. Let's make this a little bit fun and add a little bit of personality into our easing. So I'm gonna do out bounds for this one, and let's kind of just see what that would look like. So to preview it, we just click the initial keyframe and hit, it's a little fast. So this is kind of the art form, or really the skill for micro interaction is nailing these timings correctly. You don't want to just set default values on these things. You want to really spend a lot of your time kind of figuring this out. All right, so I like the speed of that just for what I'm doing. I recommend you base it off of the brand, you know, identity and the visuals and narrative, all that stuff. Don't just randomly choose fun easing properties. All right, so the next thing we'll want to do is, just to be safe, I'm going to animate the search inputs opacity just so we don't accidentally see it. Just again, like these are the things with micro interactions that's really important, is to be very diligent and make sure that you are kind of spending the time just animating and making sure tweaking, you know, touching all of the little bits of UI everywhere just to make sure everything's choreographed and feeling as smooth as possible. All right, so here we go. Let's just preview that. So you can barely see it, which is fine. We don't want it to be the start of the show, so let's just leave it at 0.5 seconds there. This is really just to prevent the user from seeing this text field, you know, when you're in this state. All right, the next thing that we want to do is, of course, to animate our Lottie. So its initial thing, so once you click search Lottie, or this Lottie element here in the navigator, under integrations will be available here where you can see Lottie. So you click Lottie, and how Lottie works is that it's by frames. So set the initial state to start from 0, of course, and then hit Lottie again, and then just make this go all the way to 100. All right, keep it linear because the easing is kind of baked into the animation, so we don't necessarily need to mess with that too much. The thing that you might want to mess with, of course, is the duration. So as you can see here, if I hit play, this Lottie is just gonna fire, and it's like super fast. So base this on your animation and also play around with it because you can speed it up. That's the beauty of Lottie. So here I've just found that 1.5 seconds works for this asset. So there we go. So that's looking good. And then let's also actually add a opacity to the Lottie itself, just so it fades in and it's not this abrupt, like, boom, here's a new element. It just adds a little bit more kind of elegance to the micro interaction. So we'll do that. We'll match the opacity properties of the input, which was just 0.5 seconds. And then I think I did out quad. And then if we preview that and hit play, it kind of has this really nice, you know, effect to it going on. All right, so that's our hover in. The very last thing is our hover out, and how I typically like to do this is just duplicate what I did on the in. Click into that, of course, we'll want to change the name. So hover out, and then all that we want to do is literally snap this back to all of the original properties. So we don't need them to be initial state, so we're gonna go ahead and remove that. And but then you want to make sure they all kind of happen at the same time. So at 0, right when you hover out, everything kind of snaps back into its original position, right? There we go. So everything is kind of looking really good. Let's just see here. I think the Lottie, I can just nudge this down a little bit. Let's go here, just to, you know, make it look nice. All right, so that's it. Let's hit publish and see what this thing is looking like, and if we need to make any tweaks. I don't think so. I hope not. All right, let's check this out. All right, here we go. Moment of truth. There she is. Definitely not aligned. So we'll maybe want to tweak that. But then as I hover, everything is going according to plan. The only issue here is the search field is not working. So why is that? Well, because my Lottie is on top of everything for some reason. So let's go ahead and look at what's going on here. The search input doesn't have a z-index, so we're going to definitely want to put a z-index in here. Now we want the z-index to be lower than the trigger button. You kind of can make them equal. I'm just putting it lower just because, as I mentioned in the beginning, I just want the search button to be all the way up the top. But because they're not actually overlapping each other, they can share the same z-index value if you want. And so now if I hit publish on this and just kind of refresh. Now you can see we can now start typing. All right, so that is it. Let's just quickly, move some things around here just so it doesn't drive us crazy. But that's pretty much it. That's the micro interaction for this nice little search bar. This is really perfect for, when your navigation is really cluttered or you don't want to put, an entire text input on your navigation. Mobile, it can work really, really great there as well. Of course, the hover interaction is not going to work, so you're going to need to create a click interaction for that. But overall, I hope you found this super helpful. Thanks for watching all the way here until the end. And guys, thank you again. Like and subscribe, whatever you do. It helps me out, super helpful. That's pretty much it, all right? Thanks guys for watching all the way to the end, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.